I'm really sorry for always being a nuisance. Thank you for being my partner all this time." A note left on the desk. That was the beginning of everything. "My name is Jaden. I'm 30 years old. I work in the editorial department of a publishing company. I married my colleague Amy 3 years ago, and we're the so-called dinks, dual income, no kids. Work and personal life are fulfilling. We had a good marriage, no complaints, or so I thought. One day, out of the blue, Amy left a divorce paper and a note and walked out of the house. There was no particular fight or any memory of blaming my wife. I was completely at a loss as to why she wanted a divorce. Going back in time a bit, I met Amy during the new employee training at work. I was in my 5th year at the company, and the junior I was in charge of was Amy, fresh out of university. "Hello, I'm Amy. Nice to meet you." I was a bit worried about her being excessively cheerful and giggling without reason. As expected, she wasn't tall that into her job. Moreover, she was clumsy and made many mistakes, the epitome of a newbie who just couldn't get it right. Even though it was tough, I decided to make her a proper worker. I need to get a handle on her characteristics. So I started observing Amy closely. She was the type to answer questions before they were fully asked and then make mistakes. But Amy was earnest in everything she did and took on even the most troublesome tasks seriously. Just her presence in the office brightened the atmosphere. She was always smiling and never missed a greeting, and before I knew it, she became the idol of the workplace. Despite being her senior, I ended up learning from Amy. Being able to do your job isn't the only thing you need as a working adult. Being the kind of person others think, "I wouldn't mind helping them," is also an important quality. Using her charm and communication skills, Amy gradually transformed into a capable worker. Working with her and guiding her passionately, I realized I was drawn to her. I didn't want to mix work with my personal life. I spent a year being a thorough mentor to Amy, drilling her in the ABCs of an editor. Then, the day I was no longer her mentor, I asked her out for a meal, under the guise of a celebration for the end of her new employee training. "Is it okay, Jaden? This place is famous. It's even been featured in magazines, right?" Amy looked around worriedly. For a celebration, the place was obviously too extravagant. I cheerfully reassured her. "It's on me today. It's a reward for your hard work this past year, so I went all out." With that, Amy smiled with relief. Even when being treated, she worries about the other person's financial situation. I liked that about her. We enjoyed a full course of famous French cuisine while talking about work. A tipsy Amy with her cheeks slightly pink was so cute it made my heart skip. After the dessert was brought out, as she was about to take a bite with a smile, I said, "To be honest, the whole celebration thing was just an excuse to ask you out. I want to ask you out for real, not just as senior and junior." Amy was gaping with her mouth wide open. Maybe it was no good. Just when I was about to get discouraged, Amy suddenly burst out laughing. "Of course, it's okay. Thank goodness, my 1-year-long unrequited love has finally paid off." Amy's response nearly knocked me over. What an honest person she is. I found myself laughing along, feeling somehow relieved. For some reason, her boundless cheerfulness was my salvation. I was glad she was my partner. Even after we started dating, I kept thinking that. The serious and nervous me, and the bright and impatient Amy. If you add me together and divide by 2, we're perfect. So, please marry me. That's how I proposed to her. Amy, crying tears of joy, happily accepted, and we made it to marriage without a hitch. Even after marriage, Amy was like a runaway train. She'd acted on her desires and, without consulting me, immediately put her decisions into action. She'd suddenly decide on a trip, or I'd come home to find a new pet. I'd give her a smile, but gradually I learned to put a stop to Amy's antics. I could mostly understand what she was thinking, and preemptively stop her from doing something rash. You could say I was the husband who acted as a stopper. Amy would puff up her cheeks and say, "I'm not a child anymore. Can you not check up on every little thing I do? It's like you're my guardian, Jaden." She'd retort like that. Every time we had an exchange like a comedic duo, I savored the happiness of being with Amy. And yet, what on earth is this divorce paper and note on the table? This time, I just couldn't understand Amy's feelings. Moreover, she had sent in her resignation to our workplace. I felt a rush of anger. I immediately grabbed my cell phone. I kept calling, but she didn't answer. I hurriedly contacted Amy's parents' house, but it seems she hasn't returned there. Amy's mom, sounding apologetic, handled my call. "I'm really sorry, but since we hadn't heard from her either, we don't know what to do." That was true. Once Amy had made up her mind, blaming someone wouldn't change the outcome. In the end, without being able to have a conversation with Amy, I reluctantly submitted the divorce papers 3 months later. It was a bitter decision, persuaded by both my parents and Amy's. 5 years after the divorce from Amy, I became a divorced office worker and threw myself into my editorial work more than ever. Well, it was the only way to distract myself from the loneliness. I was tasked with creating a tourist guide for each state, which took me on a business trip to Napa Valley in California, where Amy's folks live. It was a busy day. I was running around all day with interviews and meetings, and before I knew it, it was evening. After bidding farewell to the interview crew, I began to walk through the bustling night streets. Now that I think about it, I hadn't visited Napa Valley since the divorce from Amy. For some reason, I was hit with a wave of nostalgia and found myself enjoying a leisurely stroll, taking in the ambience around the main station area. That's when it happened. I saw a mom pulling along a little kid. I was gazing absent-mindedly when a shock hit me, and I blurted out without thinking, "Amy, isn't that Amy?" I found myself sneaking peeks at her from a distance, blending into the crowd. Sure enough, it was Amy. And thanks to the kid throwing a fuss, Amy didn't seem to notice me at all. She passed by me while talking to the kid. Watching her, I felt my pride being shredded to pieces. Dark emotions began to swirl inside me. I had struggled so much with the divorce, and yet there was Amy, seemingly remarried and living happily. It had been 5 years, but still. I was honestly shocked at how deeply I was still affected. I thought I had moved on from Amy. Realizing I still harbored feelings for her was painful. But Amy had moved on, started a new life without me. I had to keep telling myself that, trying to force acceptance. Sadly, it just wasn't my place anymore. As I was finally coming to terms with it and about to leave, that instant, "Mommy, Daddy's here," I heard a child's adorable voice and instinctively turned around. There stood Amy with a surprised expression. We both just stood there, unable to move. I couldn't shake off the word "Daddy" from my head. Amy remained silent, looking uncomfortable. I found myself blurting out, "Hey, long time no see, you look well. If you've got a minute," I suggested we go to a diner nearby to talk. Amy nodded. Then I spoke to the child. His name is apparently Joshua. A lively little boy, by the looks of it. We went into a nearby diner and initially exchanged updates about our lives, making small talk though it was awkward. After a while, I confronted Amy with a question that had always bugged me. Why did we even end up divorcing? I can't think of any reason. Amy looked uncomfortable but seemed to make up her mind. Taking a deep breath, she began. "There's something I never got to tell you." My heart was pounding as I waited for her to continue. What could have driven Amy to leave so suddenly? What had I done? "I found out your true feelings. I overheard you telling someone how my presence was a bother, how we married too soon." Even as she was entertaining a playful Joshua, Amy was seriously addressing me. Her voice was becoming tearful. Hearing that, she suddenly felt like she shouldn't be there, and she left the house, she said. I listened intently to Amy's story, but for a moment, I was completely taken aback. I had no recollection of saying such a thing. Did I ever say something I didn't mean? Even when I asked if she might have mistaken me for someone else, she just shook her head. As I was deep in thought, arms crossed, it hit me. Maybe, I've got it. It was that time. I stood up, my voice echoing in the diner. No, it's all a misunderstanding, Amy. I started to explain the situation to a confused Amy in rapid fire. That was about a fictional story for work. You must have overheard and got the wrong idea. You know that Tom from my college days is a writer, right? Amy's expression changed as if she finally caught on, her hand over her mouth. I began to explain Tom's situation. He was trying to be a novelist while working. A man juggling 2 careers. So he often came crying to me, a professional in writing, seeking advice. That day, 5 years ago, Tom was stuck on a story he was submitting for a literary award and called me. Please, don't tell Amy I called. I believe she knows one of the judges professionally. What do you honestly think of my work? I gave him advice impulsively. The protagonist's mindset about considering divorce isn't well captured. If it were me, I'd say I'm frustrated with my wife's presence. Maybe we married too soon. To dig deeper, otherwise, the following text won't be tight enough. Tom wanted to keep the content private, so I deliberately moved to the bedroom to discuss it. Little did I know that at that moment, Amy had come to retrieve something she'd forgotten. She'd overheard my advice and completely misunderstood. After 5 years, I came to learn this shocking truth. Amy's absent-mindedness was both exasperating and laughable. Although Amy tried to laugh it off awkwardly, her misunderstanding had led us to divorce. It's one of those situations where you can only laugh. Really, I'm so sorry for my mistake. Amy apologized, and there was no way I could say it's not your fault. Why hadn't she asked me about it before leaving? It was such a typical Amy misunderstanding. Amy started to share her story bit by bit. After divorcing you, Jaden, I planned to go back to my parents' house, but then I found out I was 2 months pregnant. I couldn't go back to you or my parents. So, she explained her situation to a publishing company she knew and got hired as a contract employee. Amy didn't want to be a burden to her parents, so she rented an apartment and somehow managed to give birth to my child alone. But being a single mom was harder than she'd anticipated. Struggling financially, Amy finally returned to her parents' house. She had cut off contact with them and got an earful when she showed up. I was listening, nearly collapsing from my chair, when I looked at Joshua eating his parfait. This boy is my son. I couldn't help but ask the question that was bugging me the most. Earlier, Joshua called me daddy, right? How does he know? Having never met me, Amy gave an awkward smile, maybe feeling uneasy. For Father's Day at daycare, they draw pictures. When he asked who's my dad, I showed him your photo. That's why he hugged you right away today. Learning so many shocking facts, my mind was in gridlock. Our divorce was based on a misunderstanding, and unknowingly, I had become a father to a son. While I was stunned, I'm really, truly sorry. Because of my assumptions and jumping to conclusions, I messed up your life and caused you trouble. Amy started apologizing fervently. As angry as I was inside, I couldn't help but start to find the humor in the situation. This is one heck of a life story, isn't it? I had always wanted kids from the start of my marriage, and I never wanted to divorce Amy in the first place. It's actually a happy situation for me. Thinking this, I found myself oddly accepting of Amy's wild ways. Me, who used to be so serious and stubborn. Now, not even fazed by having a child I didn't know about. I stopped Amy's earnest apologies and said, "It's okay, just calm down. More importantly, thank you for raising our child on your own these past 5 years. You must have had a tough time. You did well." Watching her tear up, I continued. I'm sorry for creating a situation that could have made you think I wanted a divorce. I was so busy with work and constant business trips back then. It's not surprising you might suspect me of cheating. Perhaps remembering those times. Amy burst into tears. Yes, I had my faults too. I shouldn't just wrap it up as her jumping to conclusions. I gently suggested to Amy. Why don't we put the craziness behind us and start over, you, me, and Joshua? What do you say? As I said this, my wife sobbed. Are you sure you want me, even though I'm such a scatterbrain? What if I cause trouble for you again? Amy said. I laughed and said, what are you talking about now? It's always been like that from the start. My dull life becomes fun and fulfilling only with an interesting twist like you. Let's go get a marriage registration form from the city hall. Hearing my sarcastic remark, a smile finally returned to Amy's face. Joshua, watching us smile, shouted, Let's go. That's my boy. He knows how to cheer up Amy. The three of us walk hand in hand down the twilight road. To make sure we don't pass by each other again. To make sure we don't part again. That was the moment Amy and I truly became husband and wife. A year has passed since that fateful reunion in Napa Valley. We remarried without a hitch. Back to being the same quirky couple, and Joshua quickly accepted me. Today is Joshua's Daycare Sports Festival. I'm dead set on winning the parent-child race. I'm going to win first prize for my son, who I made feel lonely for 5 years. Amy watches with amusement as I get fired up. Maybe I've treated Amy like a daughter in the past. But now we are each other's important life partners. I make a point to listen to Amy's opinion before making decisions. These past 5 years have been tough, but I'm determined to turn them into happy stories we can joke about. That's my resolve.